Good afternoon or good morning, folks. Lovely to have you with us. We'll probably give people a minute or so to join, to trickle in. And while we do that, I will give a quick bit of background on Effectiveness Week here at the Marketing Practice. So the idea of the week is really we're trying to tackle the question of what's working today in B2B marketing. It's quite a thorny topic, which is why we've got 3 or 4 days of pretty packed agendas on the subject. But one of the things I think is most important for us to do in the course of the week is really share some of the stories of what's working, but also to see where we can learn, how we can move forward with these things. So delighted to have Andrew Shepherd from Palo Alto Networks with me today, and we'll do a bit of a conversational run through of some experiences over the last year or so that I think will give a lot of food for thought on, I guess, some of the multiplying factors that are out there that aren't always as well documented as they could be. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're in the midst of Effectiveness Week, quite a packed agenda of various different sessions running. Do have a look through if there's other ones that you want to join. Still time to sign up or get a copy of the recordings. This one will just be available live. While we go through the session, there is an opportunity for you to use the Q&A tab. We'll come to most of those at the end of the call. But if you think of something while we're running through the presentation, do drop a question in and we'll be delighted to cover that. Well, I say we will be delighted. I guess, Andrew, we'll have a look and see what the questions are that come through and we can see how delighted we are by them. But yes, this topic today is going to be quite interesting. You hear a lot in the market about a belief that creativity can be a multiplying effect on campaign performance, on brand and demand performance. I think what we've got here are the signs that that can really be evidenced. It's a really fascinating story, I think, that we're going to run through. 3 things I think you'll see as we go through this. The business case, the business impact, as I mentioned, of making these investments, but also the impact that creativity has in turbocharging them. I think there's a point we're going to come to through this of alignment, of not seeing campaigns as one-off things that happen in the course of a quarter, not seeing them as a single channel thing, seeing them as a combined experience that the audience can take part in. And finally, because it's 2024, we're of course going to talk about AI. And I think this is a great example of AI being used to supercharge creativity as opposed to scale mediocrity, which sadly is what you see quite often with the early implementations of AI. So AI at the heart of a story here that I think is all about the business case for strong creativity and the business case for investing in brand through to demand. But after that scene set, just wanted to hand over to Andrew, if you're happy to give a bit of an introduction to the situation you found yourself in a year or so ago.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I'll start it with just framing up the overall challenge and the goals of the campaigns. So I've been with Palo Alto Networks almost 9 years, and when I joined 9 years ago, we were effectively a company playing in a single market category. We had about 2,500 people. We were starting to dabble in some adjacent markets, but if you fast forward to today, we're 15,000 people. And we really have market leading products in 3 very distinct market categories around network security, security operations, and cloud security. And we've earned the right to be sort of leader top right in 24 different analysts rating reports, whether that's a Gartner Magic Quadrant, Forrester Wave, IDC MarketScape, and so on and so forth. But I think one of the challenges that we've had, and I think it will be familiar to a lot of B2B companies and especially B2B tech companies, is struggling to create that brand awareness outside of the core product and market category that our company's early success was built upon. So as an organization, our mission is to be the cybersecurity partner of choice, protecting our digital way of life. But this really means that we need to create stronger brand awareness across the full suite of offerings. And it was also really important to us to start building our brand awareness and relationships much stronger at CXO level. So because of, we're a cybersecurity company, so we're typically very strong at CISO level. We've got great brand recognition and relationships there. But we continue, despite our size, we continue to grow at scale, like over 20% year over year each quarter. And part of us being able to continue to grow at that scale means we really need to be getting into bigger and bigger deals, bigger and bigger business transformation opportunities, and that's going to necessitate stronger and deeper relationships and brand awareness at the C level outside of security, so CIOs, CFOs especially. So the goals of the campaign were relatively straightforward. We really wanted to increase our overall brand perception and awareness within EMEA and Latin America, but really honing in specifically on the UK, France, and Germany, which are the big three markets, and really make sure that we were enhancing our sort of brand perception in the minds of the C-suite, as well as practitioners, but really to sort of position ourselves as a true cybersecurity partner. So if I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, just to some of the results we've seen. I won't walk through all of them, but just a teaser in terms of how the campaign performed. So that I've highlighted the sort of three metrics that really sort of jump out in terms of telling the story around how the campaign was successful. So in terms of aided awareness in the C-suite, we've increased over 15%. The campaign from an engagement standpoint has outperformed the industry market average by 3x. And I think that really speaks to the power of creativity that Paul was talking about. And in terms of pure play cybersecurity vendors from an unaided brand awareness perspective, we reached the number one spot. So partly showing you these ahead of time as well to encourage you that the rest of the presentation is hopefully worth listening to. So if we go back to the beginning, how did we get there? Before we kicked off the campaign, we really made sure that we did some time analyzing the market, analyzing the current situation, and it's perhaps not surprising to find that cybersecurity is typically seen as the big bad wolf. It's big news, it's bad news, it's an urgent priority. Big news in the sense that if cybercrime was an economy, it would be the world's third largest after the US and China. Huge amounts of money being made, and that's both from cyber criminals, but also nation states are increasingly using it as sort of cyber warfare in a sort of geopolitical context. It's bad news. I'm sure a lot of us are on this call from the UK, and obviously we've seen the NHS was front page news not so long ago in terms of outages, ransomware attacks, preventing operations and what have you. And you can see from the example on the screen, from a more sort of B2C brand type perspective, it can have huge reputational damage. Optus lost 10% of their customers in the wake of a data breach. Over 50% considered leaving in a following survey. So it can really be bad news if you're on the wrong end of a cyber attack. And it's an urgent priority. If you look at some of the outputs of the World Economic Forum in Davos, they typically publish a list of sort of top 5, top 10 challenges facing the world and our way of life, and invariably cyber criminality is in the top 5, alongside famine, drought, wars, climate change. It's really sort of top 5 material. And in terms of things that organizations can directly affect, it's the number one thing that they build into their resilience planning. But it's not all bad news. what we also found is that cybersecurity isn't just about threats. It's not just about the big bad wolf. Some of the research that the team did found that companies that take a leading posture on their cybersecurity are almost 6 times more likely to experience better digital transformations. They're more likely to achieve revenue growth, market share, all the things that we know as marketers. You know, the numbers that we sort of live and die by when it comes to organizational health and growth. And also cybersecurity leaders are more likely to enjoy better customer experience and better employee experience. So it really felt that there was a different angle that we could pursue with the campaign. Perhaps my favorite visual that we had in the research phase was the one that's coming up now. And it seems blindingly obvious, but I still found it quite striking when we looked at it visually. And that's that, you know, the C-suite is not a single persona. They have very different mindsets depending if they're more technical or less technical in their roles. Their focus on defense and risk versus defense and growth. So what we found is that, you know, business leaders and boards of directors are communicating more directly and more often, but they still speak very different languages. So in talking to the C-suite, we really needed to find a way that we could speak a common language across the C-suite to align their business priorities and help them understand the value of cybersecurity, rather than keeping it in that you know, technical risk top right quadrant. So bringing the insight phase together, the C-suite knows that cybersecurity is a priority, but right decisions aren't being made because they don't know how to talk together. They have a very different mindset around growth and risk, but there is a significant advantage in getting it right. It can really be a driver for growth and opportunity. So the whole strategy of the campaign that we embarked upon was, how do we shift the focus from risk to opportunity? And I'm going to hand back to Paul at this stage to unpack a bit how we brought it to life.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, I think part of the joy of this was really feeling like when we were doing this work together, we'd hit on something that was a bit distinct in the market. So as you said, I think a lot of other people talking about risks and defense and very scary imagery, and a sense that if we focused on, actually, if you as an organization feel confident in your cybersecurity position, think about the market opportunities that's going to open up for you. And it's really important that we had that confidence that there was something distinct to talk about, because we know that that's where that multiplier effect comes in, that if you have something different to say, you get that cut through benefit. So when we started planning, you know, how do we take this out into the market, one of the first things we're thinking about is how much budget to spend, where to put that budget, how that's going to look comparative to the noise in the market from the competition, etc. So we use a model like this, which talks about excess share of voice. It might be something that a few of you are familiar with, but just in case not, what it's mapping here on the vertical axis, it's looking at the share of voice of various players in the market, and horizontally it's looking and saying, well, what market share do you have? Broadly speaking, there's a line down the middle of equilibrium, where if you are capturing a certain share of voice on that line that's in line with your market share, you're probably not going to be growing, but nor are you going to be shrinking. Whereas if you've got a higher share of voice above that line, then it means you're going to be outpacing the competition. And one way of doing that is throwing money at the problem and just saying, well, we're going to buy a significant excess share of voice, but in a very crowded market with some other massive players involved, that's quite a hard thing to do. It's where you do need to look for the impact of the campaign and the creativity to help you get above that line, build more share of voice above and beyond even the stretch of the budget. So part of the approach we took here is really talking about how do we outthink the competition rather than always outspending them. And I suppose there's a range of thoughts on this slide, a couple that feel particularly important in this program. To what Anne point about timing, I think what's important here is it wasn't about needing to hit a high level of spend and reach throughout the entirety of the year. It was about being present in bursts in some very key moments, and then being able to sustain some of the conversation that those bursts earned us through the year. So it's a bit of a myth that you might need to have a certain size of budget running entire year long when you've got the opportunity to think about certain markets and the events that are happening and things like that. How do you make a real punch there? And then ultimately on the tactics placement side, a lot of that was to do with, could we be confident that the creative approach we were going to take would have that cut through and that multiplier effect to live up to the power of that strategy of focusing on the opportunities in the market rather than the risks. And Andrew's going to talk a little bit about how that came to life and how that ran out through channels. Just one thing as a bit of a preview to that, what we felt was really important when we were developing the creative theme here was that we did something that was innovative to live up to the innovation that's baked into the Palo Alto Networks product set. So AI, very hot topic, something that Palo Alto Networks had long been investing in. We thought, well, how best to communicate some of this differentiator as well as the strategy of the campaign? Part of the answer, I think, was how we used some of the creative tools, and there's other sessions during the course of this week that dive into that in more detail, but how do we use some of the creative tools at hand to use AI in the campaign creative generation as well? And particularly in a market on the right-hand side that, as we said, is so saturated with these reds, these blues, these dark, dangerous images, how do we take some of the common themes, the imagery, the keys, the padlocks, but turn it into something that's unusual and exciting? So I'll hand back over to Andrew to talk a bit about how that came to life.
Thanks, Paul. So I get to share the great reveal. So this is, this is just one of, we had about 6 different images that we were running in the market, all very consistent with the padlock. At the end of the day, we're still a cybersecurity company, but really positioning it in a different context. And I think one thing I just wanted to pick up on that Paul said that maybe I should have given insight into at the start. I mean, the importance of being distinctive in the cybersecurity market is really important because it's a really, really crowded market. So there's over 3,000 cybersecurity vendors. We're the market leader. We're the largest in the world. We have a market cap of around 110 billion at the moment. Yet our market share is still just under 10%. So it's an incredibly crowded space, very hard to stand out. So a bit of commentary, as you can see, the sort of sped up video in Waterloo Station, like really 3 things that I want to call out as we look at this and see some of the creatives on the next slide as well. And the first one is, the AI has embedded the padlock in all of the imagery. So, as I said, we're still a cybersecurity company at the end of the day, and we don't want to go so left field that people are struggling to make the association. But all of the visuals and themes align to opportunities, whether it's that it can be simple, it can enable growth, it can help you sell, it can lower your cost. We ran iterations of the same creative across digital out-of-home advertising. We ran it through programmatic advertising, demand, right through to our ABM campaign. So we use different versions for our, 1 to few, the clusters, even 1-to-1 ABM. But the brand visuals stayed the same throughout the entire customer journey. We were just able to apply copy tweaks to different scenarios, especially in the ABM format. Second thing I wanted to call out was the timing and location, particularly with regards to the digital out of home. So the bursts were specifically scheduled to align with our Ignite on Tour event series. So we really wanted to amplify the impact of Palo Alto Networks is coming to town. We didn't just pick the locations on a whim. It was very much based on strategic placements, both around where the events were going to be taking place, but also looking at common routes to the event. So for example, Ignite on Tour London happened out in East London. So we made sure that as well as Waterloo Station, we had placements along the Jubilee line around Canary Wharf and what have you as well. We each Ignite on Tour, we sandwiched it with 2 weeks digital out of home on either side of it. So we really amplified the effect of our market presence there. Perhaps my favorite bit was geo-targeting based on IP addresses. Like we all have strategic account lists, target account lists, whatever you want to call it, your must-win accounts. So based on where our key accounts were in the various markets we were targeting, we also made sure that we were picking our ad placements around both where those companies are in terms of out-of-home placements, but also in offices, you know, in elevator screens and office foyers and what have you, and making sure that we were targeting areas around the city that people were most likely to pass through. So Waterloo is a great placement, yes, but we didn't pick it because it's the biggest, fanciest billboard we could find. We chose it because if you look at all of the data of our target accounts, likely commuter routes, where they're likely to pass through, it's because Waterloo was the station that would have the greatest footfall with the right sea-level eyeballs on it. And I think the last thing I wanted to call out with regards to the creative and the visuals, and I guess this is more a nod to the work we did with the marketing practices. As a client, the interaction was just like working with a regular creative team. You know, we met with their creative designers, we had feedback conversations, iterations, all the rest of it. It's not like we had to put our feedback into some weird little bot and hope it would generate something new. But I think the difference it really made was the ability to deliver creative at speed and iterate at speed. So, you know, where we wanted changes made or where we needed kind of new concepts. Equally, if we wanted to kind of get the creative into other elements of our marketing, such as ABM or what have you, they were really able to sort of produce it at speed, which was really important to us because we only briefed the campaign at the start of August. Which is the first month of our financial year. And we needed a quarter of our annual budget spent by the end of October. So we had sort of a couple of months to get the whole thing pitched, briefed, stood up, live in market, and starting to sort of consume those dollars. And I think the fact that the TMP team used AI tools really meant we were able to move at that speed. So I'll end where we started, which was just highlighting some of the key results. I'm not going to reiterate them, more just to remind you of some of the successes we saw. And we'll just finish up on the, you know, what did we learn? What are the sort of three main takeaways? So I think challenging the status quo with insight was really critical in terms of helping us be able to tell the story. I've worked in several cybersecurity companies in my career, and it's a story that most of these companies have wanted to tell, but it's a very hard message to bring to life. And I think that insight at the start really helped us frame up a different story. When brand and demand and, you know, all the different teams work together with great creative, it brings better results. And I guess my main takeaway is the importance of getting internal teams aligned and on board early. So when we, you know, when we'd received pitches from various agencies and we had a sort of strong feeling that the marketing practice was the one we wanted to go with, we brought our global brand team on board at that stage. We brought our creative team on board at that stage, legal, procurement, and even the web teams, anyone that we thought could potentially be a speed bump down the road. We really tried to engage them as early as we could in the conversation so that they felt that they were part of the conversation rather than this was something happening to them that they might have to kind of veto or roadblock at a later date. And I think you know, the other thing is very much the alignment around our internally as an EMEA team. So I've sort of taken a lead role from a brand perspective, but it's hand in hand with our digital leader, weekly connections with our ABM team, with our head of field marketing, really making sure that we're all on the same page rather than working in silos around the campaign. And then I think the last call out is perhaps the obvious one. There's a clear case for creativity just in terms of the outcomes of the campaign and the successes we've been able to see.
Thanks, Andrew. Massive thanks for taking the time to run through it. It was quite a year's journey, I think. If people did want to pose any questions, we've got a few minutes for a discussion. I've got a couple to start us off with, but there's a Q&A function in the tab, I think. One of the things I was just going to mention on the topic you mentioned of the AI tools that sat behind some of that creative treatment. One of the things to me that was so powerful about that was even in the early meetings and the pitches, the ability to bring to life an idea that would otherwise have been incredibly time consuming to create or very hard to explain is so powerful. So I think that the point about the strategy saying we want to be differentiated, we want to talk about growth, leading us to the idea of saying, well, what if we had the shape of a padlock embedded in a peacock's tail feathers to talk about how cybersecurity can help you sell? I can half imagine myself trying to pitch that to you and the team, Andrew, in words, or madly having some sketches saying, can you picture this? And everyone thinking we're absolutely insane, as opposed to being able to visualize something that was, it was only sort of 60, 70% there and needed a lot of work to refine. But being able to bring you into the room and show you some of those creative thoughts was, I think, one of the most powerful parts of that, really.
Definitely. And I think that really helped it sort of set it apart from some of the good ideas that we saw in other places as well. But I think the way you were able to weave in the creative aspect right from the get-go really captured our attention, definitely.
One question then. So question around, you shared at the end some of the observations about what you think we can learn, but could you go a bit deeper into what that might mean about changes in the future or things you might do differently if you had to go again on the program?
Yeah, I think I could probably have half an hour just for this bit, but I think there are definitely things that we want to improve on in future. Definitely things that we potentially go back and do differently. I think one of the missteps I would say we made on the Palo Alto Networks side is because we had to get it live and out to market so quickly. I think we could have done a better job of bringing some of our regional teams on the journey. Whereas, to sort of move at speed, I think we sort of skipped some of that sales alignment. Even if just, from taking them on the journey, I think some of them felt like it was a bit done to them, just because of the speed we had to move. I think likewise, some of the tactics could have gone better. We went down a route of paying for social influencers with a mixture of success, and I think one of the things that we're going to try and build on is really getting more sort of earned reputation rather than paid for reputation. And I think one of the other thing, a couple of other things we're really looking at doing as we move forward is bridging the online and offline experiences more effectively. So really, even if it's in our EBCs, in our offices, really making sure that we're adapting some of the creative look and feel that people will be seeing in out-of-home ads or digital ads, and sort of joining up that brand experience. And last but not least, I think this was a sort of new program for us to really sort of focus on brand awareness, specifically in our theatre. At the same time, we've really started making inroads into ABM. I think both of those things have been working well, but I think they could work a lot more effectively together. I think they've been working side by side very well, but I think there's a lot more dovetailing we could do to get maximum effectiveness out of it.
I think there's one last question, time for last question around, I think people might have seen Palo Alto Networks global brand program launching over the last couple of months, including heavily featuring of Keanu Reeves in that program. So your observations about ways that this can connect into those global programs or that global versus regional debate that happens?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of fun and conversations that should probably never make their way back to HQ about how do we superimpose Keanu Reeves' head onto a peacock to sort of make bridge the creative gap. But I think, joking aside, that the campaign we've just walked people through, we were able to run because we were really lacking that global brand awareness story, so we had to stand something up ourselves. We're now in a position that I imagine is far more common for a lot of large tech vendors, and there's really a global campaign driven out of HQ, and the messaging and the visuals is far more given to us. But actually, I think it's been a positive thing because we've learned a lot, really a lot over the last 12 months with the campaign we've just run. And all of those principles and learnings we're now applying to the sort of new global brand campaign. And I think some of that trust that we've been given by our global brand teams, by our global creative teams, that we've sort of earned through the campaign that we've just talked through, I think that's really helping us apply that same creativity to the new ads that are coming our way, in terms of being able to incorporate various elements throughout the customer journey, rather than it's just a sort of lift and shift, go run this now. So you know, the learnings, the optimizations are still every bit as relevant, and I think we're doing a far stronger job of adopting and adapting components of a global campaign, now that we've had the experience.
I'm convinced you're right. Actually, I think it's kind of one of the joys of it from our perspective as well, is that there's things that we experimented with and learnt through the course of last year that I don't think you would have been able to do in the implementation of such a high profile piece of work as is now coming through from the global team. But there's definitely things we've learnt that are making that a lot more effective now that it's there. So yeah, I'm sure you're right on that one. But yeah, we will wrap up on that note. Thank you so much for sharing the story, Andrew. It was,
Thanks for having
doesn't
me.
feel like a year ago, does it, that we were kicking off? It might feel more like 5.
Yeah, it's it definitely went fast. It went very fast, but it's been fun.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, thanks for dialing in. I'd point you back in the direction of some of the other sessions, including things like a deeper dive into those creative and AI tools that are available as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this part of the Effectiveness Week program. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.